So I'm going to just give an overview of how do we know about wisdom. You know, we know about wisdom through the ancient traditions, through all faiths linked to wisdom, all faiths, through archaeology, through ancient cultures, Native Americans, Native American Indians, for example, through the collective unconscious, Carl Jung wrote all about, and through our own deep knowing. So I'm going to start off with the ancient symbols of wisdom, and these are just a couple of them. So you've got like Native American rock art, for example, that is the arrow, wiggly arrow, diagonal arrow that they found on rock spaces in America. They've been dated back to 3000 BCE. And that wiggly arrow means a person who is wise and true to themselves. And then, of course, you've got the ancient Sanskrit language, which is probably one of the oldest languages in the world. So, whereas a blue lotus is common sense and wisdom in Sanskrit. So, and Sanskrit, it links to the Hindu texts, the religious texts of poetry and music and drama and everything. So, you know, you've got these really ancient symbols of wisdom going right back to thousands and thousands of years. And then you've got Carl Jung with his collective unconscious with the archetypes. So Carl Jung did a lot of study on this and written a lot about it, where that we are all linked to this ancient source of wisdom. And he very much linked to the spiritual dimension within us, this sense of an inner voice that he noticed within his clients that was speaking, kind of people knew what to do, and he linked that very much to a sort of archetypal things, you know, the symbol of wisdom that links back to our ancient ancestors. And this symbol that people would link to would often sometimes be called the sage, sometimes a crone, wise man, goddess, that sort of ancient symbol that was one of the main symbols that Carl Jung talked about. So wisdom is often a hidden and subdued voice. This is an archaeological find that they found all these figurines. Now these are about 6 inches tall, and they're all little clay figures of something called the lady or wisdom, also known as Chokhmah in the Bible. So it used to be that she was very revered. And as June was saying the other day, you know, that God is female with the ancient cultures. And so these figures were often made as sort of very important in their temples, in their homes, and yet they all had to get destroyed. So they found absolutely thousands of these broken little figurines. In AD 70, the Romans came and destroyed the temple, and so these figurines were all having to be hidden or smashed, and so wisdom was started to be trampled on and seen as idolatrous. So there's a lot of archaeological finds that now back up some of the ancient writings that are coming along. For example, you've got ancient writings found, the discovery of the Nag Hammadi library, where they had they found 13 leather-bound papyrus codices with 52 texts that were also buried at certain times, so they didn't get found. They think that monks buried some of these. So you've got the Gospel of Thomas and Mary Magdalene and the Gospel of Philip, the secret revelation of John. All these things didn't make the Bible because they were seen as idolatrous, and but they contain a lot of wisdom literature. So we know a lot of wisdom literature through that as well as the Bible. And this is one of the lovely verses from the teaching of Silvanus, which is one of the texts that they found. Clothe yourself with wisdom like a robe, put knowledge upon you like a crown, and be seated upon the throne of perception. So you've got these lovely texts connected to wisdom, and a lot of the feminist theologians have done a lot on the different texts as well. So the ancient faiths all include the ways of wisdom, often relating to spiritual connection to understanding and enlightenment. And in the Bible, we see that the Hebrews' love of wisdom, or philosophy, means the love of Sophia, but Sophia is Greek for wisdom. So they were very much connected to this sense of wisdom. And in the Old Testament, you've got the writings on wisdom came about through the ancient Israelites' way of observing the world, as well as through the stories, the human affairs. And we've been talking about that, haven't we? That the sense of observing and a sense of the stories is really important with wisdom. It's kind of like, what are we seeing and what are we hearing, and also what are the stories that need to come, because wisdom comes through these stories. So you've got the Jewish thought began to concern itself with these moral problems by observing and by listening, by hearing the stories and the mysteries of the world. So they began to do a lot of writing, and of course you've got Solomon, who was given the gift of wisdom in that story in the Bible, with him and the people that he was with, that they would have been doing so much research into. And a lot of the books of the Bible connect to that. Some of the Apocrypha books, like Wisdom, connected to Solomon, Proverbs and things like that. And this is a verse from Wisdom 6. Wisdom is brilliant, she never fades. By those who love her, she is readily seen. By those who seek her, she is readily found. So we know a way of opening up to her, of seeing her, of connecting with her, observing, and she can be readily found. So in our current climate, wisdom has come to represent many perspectives. So she connects us to truth and to love and to beauty and to knowingness and to also feeling a bit more integrated. So, and I think there's a real hunger at the moment for wisdom. There's a real hunger for a different way of being, for a different way of moving forward in life, for a different way of listening to ourselves, of listening to each other, for getting out our heads, because for wisdom you have to get out your head. And so there's a real hunger, I think, for her, and a way moving forward in a different way. So I want to now connect to what I feel is one of the most important, and that's our own deep body knowing. And I work a lot with people on a one-to-one basis, and often talk about this opening up to our own deep body knowing. When I had a chronic illness for 7 years, this was one of the major things that was really helpful to me, that actually the body knows. The body knows what to do. And one of the things that I did at one time in my creativity, I thought about what would happen if I just started a piece of work, and I liked to stitch at the time, still do, and what happened if I just went and chose a piece of material and without any sort of thought about what to do, and ended up kind of knowing each step of the way what I wanted to do, and came out with this beautiful piece that still somewhere, because I found I was just letting the body lead, and there's something about that the body kind of knows what step to do, and we have so many people here who come to us and we say to them, look, you know what to do, you've rung us up and you've come. You know, that is, you know, there's something that prompted you to do that, because we have a lot of people who say, oh, it's taken me ages to come here. At some point, something prompted them to do that. And in our sufferings, wisdom often comes in our sufferings, where we can connect and really, you know, kind of know what to do during that time, and if we open up to our body knowing. So this is the scientific version. They've actually proved that we have got a way of knowing within our body. They used to think it was just our minds, just our brains, that we were just listening, you know, just sort of problem solving in our heads. But now they've found neurotransmitters, which are the chemicals that make messages throughout the body. They found them in all our organs, but especially our heart and our gut. And of course, those are the two main areas of emotion as well, aren't they? And they found that, for example, with a fetus, the heart starts beating before the brain's developed. You know, our heart can beat also without that brain input to start us off in life. And a lady called Dr. Candice Pert has done an awful lot of research on this, so if you want to know more, then just Google her. But she talks about the body-mind, so that the body-mind is one, and that we've got these ways that our body will actually give us messages without having to think hard or use our brains. So we're actually going to pause there and actually have a go at kind of opening up to our bodies, because for some people it's a whole new concept, kind of thinking about actually within us is a way of knowing. And I always talk about I always do this with my arms, because there's something about opening up to something deeper. You know, our heads are up here and our guts are here and our heart's here, and there's something about opening up to a lower level than our heads, than our sort of problem solving. Often, you know, when we're in a panic about something or we're wanting to solve things, so we try and think hard about it. Whereas really, there's something about opening up to our body that knows. So we're going to just pause here, and I'm going to just do an exercise just to get us into our bodies and into our senses. So what I would suggest is that you have your feet flat on the floor, because that's very grounding. Something about the energy of the earth we need to have on our bodies. So to connect to our chairs where we're sitting, so that we let the chairs support our bodies. We often keep ourselves very tense. And any tensions and anxieties can kind of stop this lovely body language coming from us. So you might want to just wriggle your shoulders and then take a slow, deep breath in and slowly let it out. So we're going to be breathing deeper into our guts. So you imagine breathing into our guts and breathing out from there. So a slower, deeper rhythm as we connect to our bodies. We're going to just notice the sensations that are going on for us in our body. So we're going to start by just noticing what is touching our skin. So maybe the clothes that we're wearing, just notice the sensation on our skins. And maybe the temperature of the air on our skins. So it might be that we can feel a little breeze. And then we're going to listen to the sensations in our bodies. So as we open up our ears, we're going to listen to perhaps gurgles in our stomachs or swishing in our ears, perhaps our heartbeat. I've got a picture there of one of the many icons of wisdom here. So we've got Holy Wisdom, or Sophia, she's called in the Greek, is red because she's earthy. She's connected to the earth and seated on a 7-pillar throne. So I want to move on about wisdom as relational. Obviously we've got wisdom within us, so we're in relation already with wisdom. And that needs to spill out over to others, otherwise it is like a spring within that gets stale. So it needs to flow. So wisdom needs, as we get in touch with our wisdom, it needs to flow out. Otherwise we do end up, with a stale river or stale well or spring inside us. So I want to just give 3 aspects of wisdom that will help us to look at wisdom. And these are 3 aspects from a lovely book that I'll tell you about at the end because I can't remember its name, where this is Elizabeth Johnson, who connects Sophia, or wisdom, with 3 aspects. And this is the first, which is Spirit Sophia. And Spirit Sophia points to the movement and the mystery of God. She brings life, she empowers and renews. She connects us to love and creativity, a movement that moves from within us to out. The pictures here are my experiments with trying to visualise wisdom. So you've got this sort of bowl shape, within, with this lovely movement going on here. And then there's a lovely saying that this is from Neil Douglas Klotz, who's done this wonderful book called Desert Wisdom, and he's taken a lot of the Eastern faith and connected to Jesus through the Aramaic and Sufis and all sorts. But he talks about confronting this Noah within us, as in the K-N-O-W, Noah within us, the one that experiences. And when we do that, we're connected to holy wisdom, the one who senses. So as you were sitting there and getting into your senses, when you hear what's inside your body or listen, when you connect to the senses, you are in the presence of that lovely holy wisdom, that chokhmah, which sounds like breath, doesn't it? Choch, breath. So the meaning of her name is the breath of awareness from underneath and within. And the developed sense of a deep body knowing has real gifts to give us, including the fulfillment of needs we often try and satisfy outside of ourselves. And just to use an example of that, when we're ill, we often think, right, okay, what do we do? I've got no idea what to do. I'll Google something on the net, I'll ring up the doctor, I'll ring 111, and these all might be very helpful things, but we often don't think, let's talk to myself and open up to my wisdom and have a think about what's going on, because it might be that our body is telling us something, what's it stopping us doing. And I just want to read a poem of mine called Creative Spirit, where I imagined myself talking to this inner spirit, this chokhmah, this wisdom that I called Creative Spirit. This is what the creative spirit I felt is the voice of the creative spirit within me. You feel me flutter in the deep, eager to emerge. My gestation needs patience, disciplines of eye, ear, stitch and still. It is my urge, driver to your journey, to play, explore, to notice. On your rising I quiver and enlarge. I am midwife, release, flow. I require presence, vulnerability, sense of trust, inquisitive openness. I connect you to belonging. Feel the earth, ground your feet, laugh. So for those of you who like creative ideas, that might be something you might like to do, to imagine that voice which often comes through the creative process, which I'll say a little bit more about later. But this is also another of my pictures with this sense of something birthing or emerging, because wisdom needs a midwife. We need that sort of birthing. So a little bit about the spirits of fear. Another aspect is this sense of mothering, sort of Mother Sophia, and a very good verse from Proverbs 8 that connects to this, that I've reworded, where wisdom is seen before the earth began. So this sense of a creator that is in connection, something that delights. I was there for ages past, I am. I existed before the earth began. I was there when the being of beings made the blueprint for the earth and the oceans. I was the craftsperson at the side of oneness. I was the constant delight, rejoicing always in the presence of everlasting life energy. So Sophia is like the first mother who brings forth life that existed in the world. And the third aspect is Jesus, and Jesus actually shows us the connection of our own deep body knowing with that of the divine. So the I and the I, this sense of the I am within us, this sense of God within us, this sense of holy wisdom within us. And it was Jesus who came as a teacher of this process of transformation. Of course, he got all the I am sayings, and all the I am sayings are connected to our senses. You know, I am the bread, I am the life, I am the light. They often connect to our senses because we're sensory beings. So they're different elements of our senses. And so Jesus lived and taught from his deep body knowing, so that we would have that as an example of that connection. He often talked about the eye of the eye, because he connected to that wisdom tradition. And of course the I am the way, the truth and the life he's talking about, it's the I am that is the way, the I am, that the holy wisdom we encounter in this spacious place within us. And Jesus also highlighted this sense of knowing together, so as especially when talking about his death in John 14:6, that way links to the I am in each of us, the way that we can link into the deep knowing of others. So it's a very relational way of knowing that Jesus was showing us. So I just wanted to give those three aspects, because there's a lot about wisdom, but just to point out that wisdom is relational. You know, she opens us up to this spaciousness within us, and I think even that's just such a wonderful thought, that we've got this amazing spaciousness within us, you know, we've got this centre with this relationship with the I am through the knowing within us, through the holy wisdom, and we can flow out from this centre to form relationship from within ourselves and out to others. So we're beings in relation right from the start. So, you know, when the egg and sperm connect, that's in relation. And the process of knowing comes from the process of relating. And also just to stress that wisdom is a felt sense. So, you know, she's seen as a divine feminine presence in the Bible, but wisdom is also a process, a felt sense within our body. And it's not just a relational between humans, you know, as we were talking about, it's between plants and animals and trees and dogs and, you know, all the things that we connect to. Our environment, you know, our home. So what I want to do is give 3 examples of new community. I want to move on now to talk about how wisdom can open us up to new community. And I'm going to give 3 examples, and then we're going to have some time of discussion between us and think of our own examples and have a time of discussion. So the first example I'm going to give is when I was really poorly and went to a place to stay. And I give this example because we have a lot of times ourselves when we're not well and we don't know what to do. We also have a lot of guests that come here who are not well and are often on their own. I have a lot of people who are on their own. And I found, because I was so ill, it was very difficult to keep my relationships. But I went to this place to stay, and I met somebody there that we got on very well with. And we decided to keep in contact with each other. And over the next umpteen years, because we're still friends, we've been church to one another. And at that time where we both couldn't go to church, it was very important to us. So the two of us were church for each other, which just meant the odd phone call when we had the energy and keeping in touch, and that was really important. And I often encourage people who are coming here who are on their own that it actually takes risk for connection to others. And there's the next slide, says about this risk. So, you know, wisdom does connect us, but we have to take that risk and that courage to actually do it. The word consciousness has a root meaning of knowing with, and all that we become aware of is in relation to our I-ness. So as we connect to somebody else, it's our I-ness that connects to their I-ness. And we have to trust that their wisdom within connects to ours, and that you know, it's a sense of trust to do that. And Rowan Williams, in his book Being Human, says something about this risk and that courage that it takes to have that relation. He says, we seek to set up a relationship, and this is a venture of courage which requires self-confidence, not in the terms of being assured that we are related already, not in the terms of being assured that we are related already to something solid inside us, to be assured that we are related already to something that holds us, engages us, and carries us through. And that's very linked to love. So, you know, we are already held, you know, wisdom is connected to this divine presence, to love. We are already held in love. And we need to trust that holding in love as we reach out to others and form that relation. So we do need risk and we do need confidence. And the second example, and I could give hundreds of examples of this, is from our art room. Amazing things go on in our art room. And I want to give one example of this. So many people walk into our art room and they say, I'm not creative, all the time. And in fact, they're the best people to have in the art room, rather than those who sit down and go, I'm an artist and I want to do this. It's much easier if they say, I'm not creative, because you could do something then. You know, that's easier than someone comes with a preconceived idea, because actually wisdom comes out through the creative process, through play. And it's often something to do with our hands first. So we had one lady that came in who was 70. She'd never done clay before, but she took a partiality to clay and she started just moulding the clay. Don't know what she made. But after that, she wrote her first poem. She'd never ever written a poem before. Wouldn't say she was creative, but a squidge with the clay opened her up to something in this lovely environment of the art room. And what's more, she wrote a poem about her husband who had died 10 years earlier. So it's the first poem that she'd written, and she wrote it about her husband. And it was on one of these days that I was running, a garden day or something like that, and she wanted to read it out at the end of the day. And we all came into the presence of this lovely man that she talked about in her poem. So, you know, we were there as a new community that had formed during the day, and this gentleman had also come into our new community. even though he was dead 10 years before. We were all community together, including this lovely man who we had a poem about. New community, it's just lovely. So I do encourage people to connect creatively with people as well. We have people who come and use our art room. I've set up a poetry group with the Quakers, some of the Quaker friends, because poetry is important to me. But if we can find a way to be creative, whether that means a walk in the woods with someone or, you know, whatever, creative conversations can really open out the wisdom. And I would encourage that. The third example was only a couple of weeks ago. Mike might recognise this, because he comes into this. So this links to the second example, the creative process. So the creative process opens the way for our becoming, for ideas to birth. It's often when we stop and get into our senses that these things happen, that the wisdom can open up and we know what to do at the next moment. So often actually anxiety sends us into our heads, whereas if we can relax and calm a bit, then that gets us into our bodies and then we know what to do. Whereas anxiety sends us in a twirl and we don't know what to do. And there's a lovely quote here. It says, "As our path unfolds, we continually give birth to ourselves, since as our life changes, we discover new ways of being and knowing." And this is a lovely picture of a wisdom tree. This is by one of our guests who was in deep, deep trauma. I suggested to her that she might like to draw this sense of a tree where your roots are rooted in something deeper. What are your roots connected to? You know, because often our roots are connected to love and stability and wisdom. And so these lovely things can come out in our fruits. So she ended up drawing this amazing picture, which is actually on the top of the stairs, I think, as you go into the room. If you want to see it in its flesh. So it's a special picture. Third example was a garden day that Mike and I took the other week. We were doing it on flourishing in a dry land. And of course, wisdom is about the spring within us, about flourishing. And Mike did a wonderful demonstration of his succulents. He was very calm, he was very measured, did a lovely demonstration in the art room. The succulents, go into a little pot, and he was demonstrating it so that the guests can do that themselves. And it went down very well, and everybody had a go at doing that. In the feedback time later on, we'd also been talking about some examples in the Bible of water coming out of rock, like Moses striking the rock, and dried wells where you kind of dig up wells and make water come. And one of our guests said in the feedback time, she said she felt that the time with the succulents, when everybody moved forward to then make a pot, everybody enthusiastic, given life, that, we'd kind of been like Moses with water coming out the rock. She really compared that. And she became the sort of prophetic voice. Nobody kind of had linked that at all, but she could see that Moses tapping the rock with this lovely water coming out was similar to Mike doing this lovely demonstration and giving everyone life, because everybody took off and everybody wanted to do it. It was a wonderful thing to do. And this is what happens with wisdom when we open up to it. In the day we'd opened up to our senses, and she had this lovely voice of actually speaking what she had seen. And we've been talking about observing and actually saying what you've seen. And often the wisdom voice needs to actually say what we've seen, because she spoke what she saw, and then everyone there, you could hear everyone going, oh yes, and everybody realised that something special had happened.
Whereas if she hadn't said anything, they wouldn't have realised that. So we had formed a new community, and out of that we had this prophetic voice of what had actually happened. So this is the way that wisdom works. When we get into our senses, it gives us that prophetic voice, and it's often saying what we're actually seeing. We need to say what we actually see. And just as a summary, I've just got a kind of summary here of some aspects that are needed to open up for wisdom and for wisdom to flow into new community. You know, we need to have that risk and trust, you know, that our I am is going to connect to their I am. We need to open up to our senses and our creativity. We need to get used to being vulnerable. You know, in a way, COVID has helped us connect more to our vulnerability, because to open up, we have to be vulnerable. I had a guest the other day saying, I don't think I can open up to my wisdom because it makes me feel too exposed, makes me feel too open, too vulnerable. And so we had a talk about vulnerability and what's that like. And we might have to do things very, very gently at first, because it is opening up to something that will make us feel more vulnerable. And if we're already vulnerable, that might be a bit much. But I think sometimes sitting with and knowing we've got this wisdom within, it's worth us trying to hear that voice in whatever way we can. We also need to be a listening and reflective presence. So we've got Mary in the Bible who pondered everything in our heart. We need to be ponderers. We need to notice what's going on and then think about it. And then we need to trust that our unique voice is coming out of our wisdom, is coming out of our true voice, and to state what we observe, because then we will be the prophets, and that's what's needed for new community. Then we will form new community.